Now we're live?
Now we're
Now
live.
we're
Okay.
unmuted and live.
Hello. Let's try this again. Welcome to No Direction, the No Direction Network's news, reviews, and interviews podcast. I'm Luis Loza. And today's episode, we have two special guest co hosts with us today. First off, we have Dustin Knight,
Howdy, howdy.
and we have Ryan Costello.
Oh, why am I taking a sip as I'm being introduced? Hi, Luis.
Hello. So today's episode, we're trying to not trying to, what am I saying? We are looking at the latest release from the Pathfinder Lost Omens line, a nice little book called Pathfinder Lost Omens Knights of Lastwall. So, unfortunately, Vanessa could not join us tonight, but we have two still ever great, ever special hosts to help us out with this. Dustin is helping on the production end, and wouldn't you know it, our good friend of the podcast, Ryan Costello, happened to even contribute to Knights of Lastwall. So it felt like he would be able to offer a wonderful perspective on this book. And yeah, I guess first I want to know some initial thoughts from either of you about this book. I mean, Ryan, you wrote for the book, but you didn't write 128 pages of this book, so you're seeing a lot of different things that you didn't contribute to. So how do you think Knights of Lastwall turned out?
I think Knights of the Last Wall turned out very well, very fun. Now, this is not meant as any kind of criticism. Let me get through the whole point. This is the kind of book I was expecting from the Lost Omens line the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And so up until now, it just feels like the Lost Omens line is constantly surprising us with new and innovative ways of presenting campaign information and the topics that it covers. This is like a more typical example of what you would get from a campaign setting book, but a very good typical example of what you would get from a campaign setting book.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. How about you, Dustin? What are your thoughts?
Oh man, I was excited when I saw the book name in the upcoming products list, given my last name. I also have a Knight of Lastwall as my first PFS character for
Oh,
PM2.
cool.
So I was especially excited. And then when I saw it, like honestly, I was thrilled because this is like practically like one of those AP players guides plus world guides all thrown in one. Like I just want
Mm-hmm.
to throw it at my players and be like, we're playing Knights of Lastwall now. Why? Because this book's amazing. So read up and we're playing.
Yeah,
Now,
so
Luis, when you
yeah.
were outlining this book,
Mhm.
what were some of the challenges of handling a topic like the Knights of Lastwall?
Okay. I'll get into that in a second, but first I wanted to explain everything we're kind of looking to do with this episode here. Uh, this episode isn't a review of Knights of Lastwall because unfortunately, some of us are just a little too close to the production of this book. I don't think I can appropriately review a book that I was the lead developer on. Of course, in the sake of transparency, I was lead developer on this book. Ryan, you wrote for this book. We have other people on the No Direction Network who have contributed to this book as well. So this is just going to be a breakdown. We're going to look over the book, talk about what's inside, and talk about what we like uh, within the book, and just kind of show it off for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. And back to your question, Ryan. Hey, what was outlining this book like? I think it was an interesting situation. The book comes on it's the second book that features an organization set in the Lost Omen setting, the first being the Pathfinder Society Guide. And the Pathfinder Society Guide felt like a no-brainer just because literally it's the name of the game is Pathfinder. The organization is the Pathfinders. You got to do a book about them. And there's a very storied history about Pathfinder Society. If you haven't been playing since first edition, or if you haven't been playing a bunch of society games, you may not know what's up with the Pathfinder Society. So we saw that as a great opportunity to kind of collapse a bunch of history and make it a lot easier to understand and get a feel for this organization. Knights of Lastwall are kind of on the opposite end of that, where they were a brand new organization in 2E, didn't really have much written about them. So this was meant to be the definitive look at the organization. There was a lot of work with both figuring out what little bits of information we had throughout the setting already, and then fleshing out a lot of ideas in advance. Ryan, you got to see the outline. There was a lot of specific requests about, hey, we want to feature this type of NPC or this type of group within the organization, or these items or this and that. So there was a lot of fleshing out being made even in the outlining phase that then was handed off to the authors to solidify more and expand more.
Yes. So when I think of a book like Knights of Lastwall, like there's two things that stand out in that title. Knights, which really seems like a narrow scope of what classes you can be, and Lastwall, which sounds like a very geographically concentrated area. And yet you want to make this, not just applicable to people of those classes in that region.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing I think we tried really hard with this book to exemplify that the Knights of Lastwall is the name of the organization, but you don't have to be a knight. You don't have to be from Lastwall to join this group. You can be a wizard, you can be a rogue, you can be whatever class you want and be a member. And you can come from wherever. And that's part of the story being told here with the organization, is that they're going wherever they can to grab whoever they can to help them out with their cause. Justin, you mentioned having a character that was already a Knight of Lastwall in organized play. How did you feel about the information that already existed for the Knights up until the point when this book came out?
I mean, there was enough to make the Regathian champion base that I wanted, but after I saw this book, there's a kind of like what led to this question. There's a lot of more class variety options here, and more ideas, inspirations between both the artwork, the NPC write-ups, and the mechanics to really flesh out a full organization of everything from casters to standard paladins to fighters to rogues to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the art, can we talk about a couple of pieces of art, or I guess a couple of pages of art that really illustrate what we're talking about here?
Sure.
So let's start with the cover.
Yes. A great cover, I feel.
I think it's understated, but there's actually a lot more going on here than you might expect. So it's Calabrine Iomadar. Am I pronouncing it the way you pronounce it in your head?
I say Iomadar. And I say Calibrin. So
Calibrin,
no.
Okay.
No, you're not.
Calibrin, it's Ynnne.
Yeah, but it's a fantasy name, so you can say it however you want.
All right. Well, I'm going to say it however I want.
Congrats.
Were I to close my eyes and you tell me to picture a Knight of Lastwall, it would be exactly this. She's got ornate armor, very regal in presentation, but the more you look at her, the more you realize just how filthy she is from combat. Her cape is in tatters, so she's well presented, but also that equipment is well used, and nothing illustrates that better than her wiping the black viscous fluid off of the end of her blade. So that I think really presents what I would expect from a Knight of Lastwall. But then, if we just open up to the next pieces of art, which are in the table of contents, not a single one of these characters looks like her. Not a single one looks like what I would expect. And especially this gnome covered in spiders, Avalorax, does not look like a Knight of Lastwall. He looks like the kind of person the Knights of Lastwall would be fighting. And so it's just a great presentation that within a couple of pages, you've set expectations for what you might find, what a Knight of Lastwall is, and then dash those expectations saying Knight of Lastwall is way more than what you might initially think.
Yeah. A fun, so because this is a breakdown, I can just kind of include a lot of fun information from the development process of this.
Please.
You better be fun.
It's a good commentary, but the tables of contents as of late in the Lost Omens books have had a lot of pieces of art featured across the bottom, and I think that's just partially because table of contents don't usually fill up all 2 pages worth. We're not a rule book that has 40 different sections in the entire book, or whatever it would be to take up the whole section. But that means art gets to have fun and put art pieces that they like. But I also think looking at this now, I realize, they sure picked a dwarf and a gnome to fit in most of the art without worrying about it eating up too much space in that area. So they can show off some of the more full pieces of art without having to worry about it's going to take up too much space. It's just a fun little thing.
Clever.
But the other, I think, interesting piece of art is more of a series of pieces that begin on the next page after the table of content. The 4 chapter introductions for the book, which are the big 2-page splash pieces that kind of are hopefully selling you on what's going on with these knights. And these are an interesting case in that they're meant to tell a story on their own. Normally, these are just kind of big, flashy, exciting pieces. But if you look at all 4 chapter introductions, you start off with a young child being offered a hand amidst a great battle by a knight of Lastwall. And as you follow this story, you get to see them kind of join the ranks of Knights of Lastwall and undergo training, and eventually, by the end of it, become a knight themselves and be out in battle and stuff like that, which is an idea I had just out of nowhere. It's like, I think it'd be fun to have a kid, that you rescue and then get to see them grow up to become a knight. So it's a fun thing, I think. And I was just personally proud of it, so I wanted to shine a line on it. But
I'm glad you did. I had not noticed at all.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that.
So that's also, I think, hoping to sell you on the idea that, like, hey, the knights help people. That's ultimately what they are. They're a good organization, literally neutral good organization. But I think that leads us into this first section of the book, which is the introduction chapter.
Yeah.
Which, for the most part, is just an introduction on what to expect with this book, as well as a history on the book, or of the Knights of Lastwall organization, excuse me. And finally, information on the Knights as an organization themselves, which is where I think things start getting really interesting, is the life as a Knight of Lastwall, which tells you all about membership and things like that.
Since we're here, what was the thinking replacing the Knights of Ozum with the Knights of Lastwall?
The Knights of Ozum, I think, they were the knights that existed in Lastwall, and they were there when it fell. They were still holding vigil at the time until things went wrong and Lastwall became the Gravelands. And I think the change to the Knights of Lastwall represented a change in mindset for the group as a whole, rather than just sitting there and hoping to keep an eye on the Whispering Tyrant and things like that. They recognize that, hey, this passivity has led to disaster. Let's, instead of being reactive, let's be active. And as a result, let's change who we are as part of that. And also in honor of Lastwall that has fallen, let's keep that name alive as well.
We have a question from Numbat18 in chat. Since we were talking about those chapter splash pages of art, who is the artist?
I will have to track that down, but I can tell you in just a little bit.
All right. Well, while you're looking that up, I'm going to compliment one of the sidebars. It is no, not that one. There we go. The Knightly Slang. So typically there's a sidebar like this in the last couple of Lost Omens books, and nothing makes me want to play a character more than getting to use some of this slang. A lot of it is really clever. It's real thought out, and it really defines the character of this organization. So like Ash for cover, Bones for corporeal undead, and I like that the way the Bones definition uses Hisser, which we find out later. So it's a nice setup for what's to come.
Yeah, really cool. Kind of gives me some old, like, almost Planescape vibes in, like, the best possible way.
And something else I like about this first chapter is that it is written useful both for GMs as players. It is the history of what is happening in the world. It gives you the lore you need, but then it also gives you the experience of being a knight, possibly what your character was doing up until the start of the campaign. So you read this, it gives you a good idea of the training that you've been through, the variety of options for how your character could have gotten into the Knights of Lastwall. And it just really presents it for no matter what purpose it is. This is neither a GM book or a player book. This is an everybody that wants to know this stuff book.
I found the artist's name, which I've thrown into the chat, but I'm also going to say here, of course. Ainur, Ainur Salamova. It did those 4 chapter opener pieces. So track them down if you're interested in seeing more cool stuff. So while we have this Life as a Knight of Lastwall kind of pulled up. I'm wondering, do you feel that it covered enough of the information you would need to know what you're doing with a Knight of Lastfall? You know, hey, I as a GM wanted to know membership stuff or the kind of stuff to expect as a player. You think it covers enough of that, or are you feeling like it's lacking in some places?
Oh, yeah. I feel like this is a great aid for anyone who wants to play a knight themselves, or even for a GM who just want to pass a copy, have every one of their players buy a PDF or pass the copy of their book physically around the table and tell them, like, here's some information about what it's like being a knight. And what's it like being a Cassian if you're young, or if you're coming in later as a foreigner into the order to fight against Tar-Baphon, and kind of gives you a great overview of how to play that kind of a character.
Yeah, I feel like if there was a Knights of Lastwall adventure path, this first chapter, or at least the first chunk of the chapter, would be the player's guide.
Yeah. Yep. If you don't mind me saying, by the way, I do really love that there's an entire relationship here on an entire section in this chapter about relationships with other factions and nations within Absalom, or within Lost Omens, which is great for players who, if you were playing a Knight of Lastwall campaign, will want to be like, well, I don't really want to take any of these archetypes, but I do really want to play someone from Mangyamba. Would that be okay? And be like, yeah, here's a whole section on how the Mangyamba helps the Knights of Lastwall. And of course, then what was really funny in here is you have a sidebar here of allies and foes, and I noticed Firebrands is on both.
So is Hell Knights.
As is Hell Knights.
Your first two allies, Firebrands and Hell Knights. Your first two foes, Firebrands and Hell Knights.
Yeah.
I
think that's, speaks a lot about dynamics, and hopefully sets up a lot of interesting story hooks as well as a result.
Well, from an alignment perspective, it makes sense because the Knights of Lastwall are neutral good, and so the Firebrands are chaotic, and so sometimes neutral and chaotic get along, sometimes they do not.
Yeah. And
Hell Knights are very lawful, and so the same thing. Sometimes there is overlap, and sometimes there is clash.
Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, I don't know if there's too much else to break down in that starting chapter, in that intro chapter, unless you have any thoughts. I think we can move on to the next chapter of the book, which is Among the Knights, which is a big breakdown of the various groups within the Knights of Lastwall, as well as the important NPCs and the important fates for Knights of Lastwall. The chapter opens with a little introduction on the factions and one of my favorite pieces in the book, which is a sprite riding a little corgi, and mentions that they are a member of the Wing Squad.
Oh man, that was the first piece where I had to stop flipping through the book and just, wait, what? Oh wow, that's amazing. I love that so much. I want that as like a pawn now.
Well, and the look on the corgi's face is very much like, Daddy dressed me up for this picture and I have to be good, but I cannot wait for these twigs to get off my head. That is just the saddest looking armor on that corgi.
Hey, they just got to be fast, right?
Right.
If you don't get hit, you don't have to worry about, or if you're too fast to get hit, you don't have to worry about your armor too much. So the Knights of Lastwall break down into two major factions within the organization itself: the Shining Sentinels, which are kind of your knight in shining armor, and the Crimson Reclaimers, which are kind of your more vengeful kind of strike team style of knights, which they each get, I don't know, like
I think 4 pages each.
Yeah, a fair amount of information, which is, I think, hopefully fleshes out a lot of them. Of those two, do you have a preference between the different groups?
I lean more towards the Shining Sentinels. I guess just the knight name still gives me the idea of like a noble in the like polite sense. Yeah. And so just having just like very ornate, honorable warriors, that's the first impression I get when I think of them.
Mm-hmm.
I lean toward the Crimson Reclaimers.
How dare you.
I know. I love shouting. I love sneaking up on bad guys and shouting the Crimson Oath and uh, playing a little bit more. Uh, I don't want to say clever, but less chivalric. Because it's necessary sometimes, especially against hordes of undead who don't care how honorable you are as long as you're tasty.
Now, was this something that was introduced earlier, Luis, that you fleshed out, or was this a new concept brought to Knights of Lastwall?
It was introduced. I guess I can mention that the Knights of Lastwall as a faction, or I guess an organization within the setting, were introduced in the Lost Omens character guide, and it gave you a bit of basic information, including who the knights are, what they're up to. It mentioned the breakdown between the Shining Sentinels and Crimson Reclaimers, and then also gave you archetypes and some other stuff. So that was information that already existed, and we got to flesh out already a bit more, I think. And then from there, we also got to talk about a couple of other smaller groups that are, I'd say, bigger than your typical adventuring party, but not so big that they're considered one of the major factions within the organization. And it includes some stuff that you wrote, Ryan.
Yeah, this is probably the majority of what I wrote for the book. I wrote the Charcoal Battalion, which was the remnants of the Iron Fang Legion, or like a portion of the Iron Fang Legion, was donated to the cause. And most of the backstory there is just talking about how the Knights got the message saying like, hey, we're going to send all these hobgoblins to help. And the Knights were kind of like, I don't know if we want this help. But then the general of the Iron Fang Legion convinced them, and this was probably the most challenging thing I wrote in the book because of all the adventure paths in first edition. The Iron Fang Legion might be the one I know the least about. No, it's Iron Fang Invasion is what it's called, right? Yeah. I know very little about that one, and I didn't realize that at the end the Iron Fang Legion turns good, and so that was a fun surprise in the research. And
could I ask you, Ryan?
Yes.
I was really surprised to see that Lieutenant Galvry of the Charcoal Battalion was a hobgoblin living monolith. Was there a specific inspiration for that?
I like the living monolith. Like,
that's fair.
I believe in the outline it just said an Iron Fang Legion faction, and so the name and the connection to rock and fire was all something that I had to contribute to it. And I think the starting point was I've got to work a living monolith into one of my factions, and the Charcoal Battalion is the one that had the least idea right off the bat, and so it's the one that I had to play with the most elements until I came up with something original and I hope interesting. In fact, I believe is interesting for something that we're going to talk about in the shoutouts.
Yeah,
great,
absolutely.
In fact, I remember that was the starting point, and I thought that nothing Living Monolith related actually made it into the final turnover, but apparently I did manage to fit it in somewhere in the description of our main lieutenant there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
It's surprising how much flavor you end up packing into those micro stat blocks by just saying, oh, they're a living monolith, rather than like lieutenant or captain or knight or whatever. That tells you a lot about him, and also ideally helps the GM a lot by being like, all right, well, I guess I know how to stat him up.
Exactly.
I think you also wrote Eutropia's Vanguard.
No, I didn't write Eutropia's Vanguard. Okay. I wrote the Final Epitaph, which is Pharasma's Legion. I'm very happy with that name. In fact, in general, I'm happy with the names of the legions that I came up with. But epitaph is a word I particularly enjoy. And so the idea that these are the knights who are on Pharasma's side, that it's like, oh, you think you're still going to walk the earth, you dead creature. No, we are finishing you off. And just that these are the most zealous of all the knights, and that the other knights of Lastwall have to be like, yes, thank you for joining us. Now, calm down. We have to be tactical. We have to be smart about this. We cannot just run into the Gravelands and wipe out every undead, because you will get killed and turn into an undead creature. Then I also made the Rampart Warband, which are the orcs of former Hold of Velkson. Also, so similar to the Iron Fang Legion, I had to find a way to take these creatures that in first edition had been traditionally presented as like, these are default bad guys, and now be like, they are not. They are completely, like, they're multifaceted as an ancestry, and these specifically are very heroic or willing to make a sacrifice. And I had to make the two legions feel very different. So I really like the idea that the Rampart Warbands are the orcs of Belkzen that were like, they're protecting us from this undead legion. We're okay with that. We're going to do everything we can to make them safe, because a lot of what was written in first edition about the relationship between Belkzen and Lastwall was that Lastwall was so busy with keeping Tarbar's Fawn locked up and managing the undead that the orcs would like take advantage of that, and they would do these strikes and they would move the border up and up. And so the Rampart Warbands are the orcs that were like, stop it! We need them. We all benefit from what they're doing. And so then when the Knights of Lastwall are forming, they're like, I remember those orcs. Those were the guys that we're pretty okay with. And so it was actually a pretty easy mutual agreement when they came together.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think my favorite of the factions that I wrote was the Vulture Knights. Vultures are extremely important creatures for Earth's ecosystem. They eat carrion, they control disease, and yet we always cast them as villains in cartoons and stuff. And so I was like, no, heroic vultures. That is my goal here. So they're the Eagle Knights, but they're the Eagle Knights that are fighting undead, and they specifically use a giant vulture that circles around the dead carcasses, as vultures are known to do, and they're using this tactically so that they know that if he's circling here, that is the area that I have to worry about the undead, and then they can swarm in. I was, that one just came out fully formed as soon as I knew there was an Eagle Knight faction, and I'm glad that like you basically left it as I turned it over, Luis, which is always exciting.
Well, I mean, the Vulture Knights, I think, were probably my favorite of the ones that you provided. I just thought it was such a brilliant idea to use vultures. Like, well, of course, they're going to be able to find undead, just walking food very easily. So, yeah, I thought it was great. And also thought it was a great kind of subversion of your typical... I mean, there's already a number of subversions of your typical knight in shining armor with the charcoal battalion and the Rampart Warband. Again, they were ancestries that were presented as generally evil. First edition, we're already trying to shake that up by shaking that up a bit more with making them a part of the good faction. And then Vulture Knights, I think, again, vultures, like you said, are not presented as good very often. So just shaking that up even more, and it's just interesting and fun, and also I think helps sell the idea that at this point the Knights of Lastwall are taking anyone who helps, and as long as you're furthering the cause, they don't care what you look like or anything like that. Just get the job done and do some good out there.
Exactly. Did the Vulture Knights have to pay extra to get from Andron all the way up to Lastwall?
Pay extra?
Because of
it's
the
already fairly expensive.
No, because of the oversized carrion.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. Dustin, are there any of these smaller groups that you had a particular fondness for?
Yes. Well, in addition to the ones already mentioned, I was very pleasantly surprised to see the Dozen Roses. Any more lore about Grey Maidens, I'm all on board for. I have friends who are very inspired by them, and I love to see their faces light up when they get a look at any new content about them. And there was a great illustration I showed earlier of that. And the Velamis Scholars, I was really happy to see that. They're the Mangyambas, kind of sending some people there to help us support with supply chains and developing magical equipment. And I was happy to see a Knoll Spellsinger be their go-to kind of organizer.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's no surprise that the Dozen Roses exist in the book. If you looked at the cover, you would see that we have 3 main authors listed on the cover. We have multiple authors, but because of their contributions to the book, together they wrote over half of the book. I think it was something like 60 odd pages of the book were written by just these 3 authors: Jessica Catalan, Ron Lundeen, and Isabel Thorne. And I think Isabel has made it known her love for the Grey Maidens and stuff like that. And she very much was like, I don't want to write this entire extra faction thing, but let me write the Grey Maiden faction that you're mentioning, and then leave the rest to whomever. So Ryan got to come in and cover some of those, and then one of the other authors, Alistair Guzman, got to cover the rest. So while I'm mentioning all these authors, let me just say the rest of the names. We had Banana Chan, Katina Davis, Ianara Natividad, Aaron Roberts, and Ashton Sperry on. A great team. for a book that I was here's some more developer commentary. I was just like unsure about how much I was gonna like the idea of this book. I thought, okay, we're going to be doing this in a way that lines up pretty well with Book of the Dead. Yeah, I guess let's do Knights of Lastfall. There wasn't much enthusiasm on my part, but as I was writing this outline and fleshing them out and getting ideas about what these knights could do, how they work, and bring other people in and kind of turn some of the ideas of a knight faction on its head, I got a lot of excitement, and ultimately when I saw everyone's writing come in and finally got to develop the book and put it all together, it was, I ended up loving the faction so much more than I ever thought I would.
Nice.
Yeah. After these groups, all these Shining Sentinels and the like, we go into our notable figures. We talk about important NPCs that are important members of the Knights of Lastfall. They range from, your leaders of these factions to even the kind of more on the boots or on the boots on the ground style, like people who are fighting out there, or someone who's doing the animal training of the different mounts and stuff. There's a lot of different individuals here. Ryan, I think you covered Calabrins. Is that right?
do.
Yes.
I cover our cover girl.
Yes. How was writing a character that already had a profile in Legends? You had
I almost felt guilty that I was paid for this, because I just took what was written in Legends and made it shorter. There's a little bit of new information I added, but honestly, not much. Like, it's, I think anything that I knew that I added was stuff that I'd seen elsewhere in the outline and knew that wasn't mentioned in Legends. And so just for consistency across this book, I added that. But yeah, for the most part, it was fun to write such a significant character to the faction, but it was very easy.
What made you pick her over you had a number of people available to you at that time, and what was it about Caliburn that drew you to her in terms of, I'd like to write her? Or was it just, I
don't remember.
It might have been that there weren't that many NPCs left anyway.
Yeah, she might have been the last one. So I have no great insight here. This is just some writing that I did for you.
That's totally fine. That's sometimes the job, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Are there any particular NPCs among the major NPCs or even the minor figures presented at the start of the section that you particularly feel some affinity to or really like?
Very much, and I think you can guess.
Yeah.
Avalorix.
Uh-huh.
The gnome seer who's like making the predictions, and everyone takes his word for like he's tapped into some divine information that is helping the knights with their quest. And then just mentioned here on the sidebar, by the way, he is a psycho-comp bounty hunter who is using the Knights of Lastwall for everyone's mutual benefit, but it's just his little secret that he's not a gnome. Yeah. He is an extraplanar creature who is, he is tasked with claiming Tar-Baphon's soul. Like, I love that you've got this entire write-up, but that's just kind of the veil. This sidebar is what's really going on with this character, and that's amazing. And I know that the authors don't often write the sidebar, so was this something, like, does the author of this section even know that that's what's really going on with this character?
So there were hints. I think Avalorix was mentioned in the character guide as, like, something's up with this NPC. There's some weirdness to them. And I think so Isabel Thorne, who contributed greatly to this book, wrote the Knights of Lastwall section in character guide, and I think she had dropped some hints in the comments. It's like, hey, I actually this is not a gnome. This is not who they say they are. I'd love to explore that in greater detail later. So we got to kind of pull up on this character again in this book and be like, oh, let's just reveal a secret now. Let's go for it. Because I don't know when we'll have a chance to come back to the Knights of Lastwall in this capacity. And then if we do, it's probably in like some Tar-Baphon related content. Avalorix would probably sit on the sidelines of the sidelines in such a story. So like trying to reveal that in the middle of some kind of adventure like that would be kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's give the GMs a secret or the players a secret. If there's some players that know this secret, that makes an interesting hook and connection to the Knights of Lastwall, where they have to help keep that secret and stuff like that as well. But yeah, we knew about it. I don't remember who wrote this. I think it was Jessica Catalan ended up writing this, and I think we had told her, hey, here's the case, just reveal it, go ahead.
Now I also like that it takes the trope of like the NPC is not who you think, but it's still a good guy. Like it's not someone that is villainously manipulating the organization. They're heroically manipulating the organization. They just have their reasons for being in disguise.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that Avalorix is secretly Spider Gnome?
Yeah.
He's not a gnome.
Okay, Spider Marigna.
Yeah, secretly. Have you seen the art? He's covered in spiders. Don't
ruin my Spider-Man pun.
Okay.
I love that you included Ileana Testhake. I think it's great to have her in there just as someone to point to for like, hey, because a lot of people when Book of the Dead came out, I noticed on social media were asking, can I play a Knight of Lastwall skeleton or a Knight of Lastwall vampire? And having that entry in there is really helpful to point to and be like, yeah, look, here's one. They exist.
Yeah. And there's some information at the start of the book where it's talking about membership and stuff like that, and about how if you try 3 times, they eventually let you in because of your persistence stuff. So, if there's a good undead out there that wants to be recognized and wants to join up Knights of Lastwall, I think I mentioned a skeleton that comes back to life that died when Lastwall fell, but wants to keep their vigil and their oath going, and comes and joins the Knights. I'm sure they'd eventually be let in, and if they turn out to be evil, there's enough Knights of Lastwall surrounding them that it shouldn't be too tough to take them out.
Louis, I have a question about art in this section.
Mm-hmm.
For Buttons and Fen Tunwalker.
Yes.
Fen is a male halfling. Mm-hmm. Fen in the art is wearing shoes.
Yep.
As you just discussed in your most recent episode of Legend Lore,
mm-hmm.
There's no halflings with shoes. This is just not a thing.
Yeah, typically no. But Fen is a special halfling in that the sketch came in and, we didn't see enough detail to tell whether or not he was wearing shoes. And by the time the final piece came in, I guess he's wearing shoes. He's a unique halfling in that he's one of the few that wears shoes out there. So
I think it's Buttons' influence.
Yeah.
There any other NPCs that you liked in this section? You don't have to like all of them.
So. Bayerville Starshine.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Love seeing Shell and Paladins, Shell and Knight Paladins, and very great backstory. Fun character. Like, I feel like if I needed a Knight of Lastwall to meet my PCs, that would probably be the first one I'd pick.
So I particularly like Buttons and Fen Tunwalker just because it's cute to see 2 knights fall in love and that be very important to the knights. There was an idea from a couple years back. One of the Pathfinder Society scenarios I wrote was Linorm King's base and stuff, and the idea was that there was going to be some kind of very old couple, a battle couple as they called them, written in there, and then the things worked out that they didn't end up in the adventure at all. But that idea of a kind of older couple that fell in love during battle and continues to fight together in battle was an inspiration for this. So I asked specifically in the outline, hey, give us a battle couple, whatever they are, that's up to you, but they're a couple. So I like that a lot. And I'm also a big fan of Kagrik Daybreak's mutton chops.
Yes.
Yes. It's just something else entirely.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. After this, we look at the faith for the various Knights of Lastfall. There's a lot of different good faiths, and also faiths that are good as Knights of Lastwall who wants to worship someone, you have lots of good options, including some classic ones like Iomade and Pharasma. There's a lot of new deities in here that either are premiering for the first time or haven't shown up in 2e at all yet. Any particular standouts for these deities here?
Well, the thing that really stands out the most for me in this section is the art and how we're seeing more battle-ready presentations of some of our familiar gods. So Pharasma,
you noticed.
I did notice Pharasma with a shield, and Shilin with like mage armor. Shilin especially, that stands out as contrary to, well, not contrary, but very different from how she's usually interpreted in artwork.
True.
Any deity that already had art in like Gods and Magic, I decided they should have some kind of different pose to show that they're battle ready or something else going on. So Sarenrae also has like a fireball ready to launch and things like that, just because otherwise you're getting kind of the same pieces over and over.
Right.
So yeah, thanks for noticing.
Well, thanks for doing it.
Yeah, always love more deity write-ups like this, and these are really, 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 really fun.
I think another thing we had to do to, I feel, differentiate these entries, other than changing up the art, is changing the focus of them. Gods and Magic was very general purpose. If you're a worshiper, here's some basic information. But some of these entries, like Iomedes and Pharasmas, talk about how Knights of Lastwall specifically worship these characters and how they're important to the Knights of Lastwall. So having that focus, I think, hopefully makes this information still useful, even though you might already know who Sarenrae is, for example.
That's fair. Did you have any reaction when you saw, was there any story or reaction? Because I noticed Arqueros, the Golden Bulwark, his artwork was very stunning. It's fantastic, but very visually noticeable and stunning. And I noticed he got a place in the table of contents as well.
I mean, it just looks cool, right? Like, sometimes things just look great, and I don't have much more comment than I think that looks awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Like the butterfly crown in particular is like a weird but interesting detail about, that's not what you would expect a big kind of tough armored bodyguard god to have. Just it's one of those things that I think is fun to speculate on, like, oh, why does he have butterflies? Maybe someone can build on that in the future in a later book or on Infinite or something like that.
Awesome.
So includes a number of pantheons, which are kind of a thing that I think, Dustin, you know pretty well about pantheons.
Yes.
Just taking some of the gods presented here, mixing them into a pantheon or other ones that make a lot of sense. So I think there's some that include gods that aren't featured in this book, but are still kind of important or helpful as gods for worship, like Gazre and Desna are featured as part of one of these pantheons. So, yeah, just a lot of options if you're looking to be someone who worships a god or follows some kind of faith as a Knight of Lastwall.
There's even a good sidebar here on how to make your own pantheon using the other gods presented in this book or expanding upon the existing ones.
The fair number of that information is stuff I had already written for blog posts and stuff like that, and I figured throwing it in a spot where someone can read it in a book properly and get that information, because I don't expect everyone to go to our blogs to find that kind of information. Hopefully that helps someone in the future. And then we come to the, depending on who you are, the most important chapter of the book with all the new rules options here, including the other contribution from Ryan, some backgrounds.
Well, before we get to the backgrounds, I do like that the introduction starts with the all classes welcome sidebar. Just once again reiterating that it's like, because there's a very good chance people went straight to this chapter when they're looking at the book to see what their options are. So yeah, reiterating right there, it's like, look, it's not just the heavily armored warrior types. Anybody can be a Knight of Lastwall. But yeah, so the backgrounds were really fun to write. This is technically my first published second edition rules material. Everything else I've written for you has been flavor, like my Lost Omens Legends, and the crunch that I had turned over in that got completely replaced. None of that got published. And so technically, this is the first, I mean, backgrounds are not really elaborate rules, but I'm just saying, it is nice to see that I've now officially written Pathfinder 2nd Edition rules material. And this was really fun because I just went back and forth through the outline several times looking for things that are mentioned somewhere else so that we can then draw them in and make backgrounds out of them. I didn't turn any of my factions or any of the other factions into backgrounds, and I kind of, had I had twice the word count, I probably would have made one per. But because I couldn't do one for everyone, I didn't do anybody, and instead I focused on other concepts, like you were mentioning, how if you apply 3 times to the knights, you get in, and so that became a rare background, relentless dedication. I've got a background, or there is a background both for people that are in favor of the Crimson Oath and people that are super suspicious of the Crimson Oath. The Crimson Reclaimers. Really, not much else to talk about here. It's backgrounds. I think they're good. They're fun.
How much fun did you have coming up with the title for Once Bitten?
I know you've said that's a play on words, but it's also like it's a good, like, that expression is good for what someone who is a knight of Lastwall like experienced before getting into it. As much as I like the name of it, my favorite part of that is that you got bit by an undead and you didn't become undead either through medical intervention, luck, or misunderstanding how undeath spreads. Like, you were bit by a skeleton or something and you're like, I'm going to turn into a skeleton. It's like, no. No, you fool.
Yeah, that's actually was my favorite background in this Once Bitten.
Really?
I liked it for the flavor. Then I reread through them again for mechanics, and I'm like, oh, wow, another background for battle medicine. Awesome. Oh, and it's my favorite background flavor-wise. Great.
Flavor.
Good job, Ryan.
Bitten.
The book then goes into expansions on existing archetypes, which is a not necessarily brand new tech, if you will. Pathfinder Society Guide took existing Pathfinder Society archetypes and added new archetypes for them. Hey, if you were playing a Knight of Lastwall, perhaps with a character in Pathfinder Society, here's more options for you with the existing archetypes.
Sorry, Project JKO in chat is saying, I would argue that you can turn into a skeleton if you are bitten enough times.
That's fair.
But as the background says, you were once bitten. But yeah, talking about the archetypes and expanding on them, I love this for a lot of reasons. One of them is that if an archetype is presented in a book, it doesn't have to be the only time you cover that topic. And you don't have to make a whole new archetype that's basically the same thing, but, adds a couple of things that were not covered by the original one. This just lets you expand on a concept, and now you can expand on the mechanics so that that concept ties into it. You're not beholden to the original version of what that archetype was. But I also like that were I GMing a Knights of Lastwall campaign, I would probably say something like everyone gets free archetype, but it's got to be one of the Knights of Lastwall archetypes, which there's like 3 of them. And, if people argued they wanted a different archetype, I'd probably listen to arguments. But so the fact that now these archetypes are also have the most variety of feats to them means that if we have multiple people in the party with the same archetype, they will probably have very different feels and very different mechanical directions that they go with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's even different capstone feats for the archetypes, which that's fantastic. I didn't expect that, and that's really cool to see 2 different 20th level feats for the same archetype. That's really neat. And of course, additional feats, putting in additional feats into an existing archetype is fantastic. It's so cool. It opens up so much room.
The thing that is new in this book is the section immediately after these archetypes, which is the other archetype section, which takes the existing archetypes from the APG, like Archer and Cavalier and Marshal, and adds new feats to them, which are more Knights of Lastwall flavored, which is a thing that I think... So I have history with Pathfinder 1, where player companion options or campaign sending book options would show up in that book and then never be seen again. You couldn't reference them in core rule books or anything like that. If you were very lucky, you could maybe point to an existing thing from one campaign setting book to another campaign setting book if they're still pretty relevant. But for the most part, that's a rule that existed. Like, don't cross-pollinate, which I wasn't really in favor of. And one of the things I demanded when we were switching over to second edition is let me just point to existing Lost Omens books and not worry about, oh, well, someone might not have that. You know, we have Archives of Nethys. We have so many sources now where we can expect a majority of players to be able to find this kind of stuff. And that was allowed. And as part of that, I've been trying to figure out different ways to kind of expand things without having to do, like you said, Ryan, a brand new archetype, which is mostly the same, but it's a little bit of different flavor, a little bit of different mechanics to justify its existence, when in fact it could have just been an expansion on another thing. So rather than have to come up with more archetypes for the Knights of Lastwall, I just figured it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of archetypes that already map really well. Let's just make them more Knights of Lastwall ish. We give them a lot more Knights of Lastwall flavor. So that's how this section came about.
And it's a game changer. It's awesome. I can't wait to see. I hope there's a lot of Infinite creators who go to this page and see it and go, oh, wow, we can just expand on what already exists, like you said, rather than make an entire new thing.
They're great.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's not that much more I can say in terms of.
Yeah, I like it. Like I don't have much to add beyond what you were saying. Like this is a great idea. This is a great use of, you know, the pages, that it's not making new archetypes, it's taking the themes and adding very little new mechanics to completely change an existing archetype to fit a new theme.
I feel like, Dustin, you have a lot more to say.
Oh yeah. So first thing that hit me was instant armor. Is great. It's classic. It lets you instantly you could bond with your armor with a 10-minute ritual and then instantly don it as a 3-action activity. So you could get your transformation sequence on, which totally worth a class feat just to be able to say that you have a transformation sequence. For no other reason at all.
It's not for the armor, it's for the sequence.
Oh, it is. It totally is. It's so you could load up your foundry and have the music play and do your whole sequence. At least the first time. I saw a Vigilant Benediction, and I had to read it a few times just to make sure to see if it was only an archetype feat or not, because it's just so cool. It reminds me of the Divine Obedience feats from 1E, where you pick a deity and you get a spell. And then there's a big list of spells that apply to all the deities on the list, which that's great, because if you take it multiple times, not only do you get multiple spells, but it also pumps up your divine spell DC and divine spell attack roll, which is great, because there are some archetypes early on that don't exactly do that, and it doesn't feel as good, and you want to burn feats to up that DC, and you can't. And so putting it in here is great, and makes this a very, very cool choice that adds something in addition to those awesome innate spells. Plus, sometimes you want, to get a mechanical benefit from worshipping, like, Milani. You want, like, Fire Shield or Mage Armor, not just without having to be a champion or a cleric. So, yeah, that's cool, too. And then another, like, first time in Pathfinder 2e, we have a 12th or 14th level feat that lets you regain 2 focus points when you refocus as an archetype feat, which 14th level, Crimson Oath to Devotion, which that's really cool, because if you're a fighter or a rogue, or a couple other classes, ranger, there's a few classes that don't get access to the 12th level feat that lets you regain multiple focus points when you refocus, and since it's 12th level, you can't get it with multi-class dedication. So now people, Knight Reclaimants, can load up on focus spells, which the Crimson Knights have a lot of really cool ones, and don't have to worry about, running out of focus points at the end of the day. Which that was really cool too. The actual focus spell, awesome too. For Love, for Lightning, really cool. Just throwing out a big burst of electricity. Uses another section of the vow. Invoke the Crimson Oath was, I'll admit, it was the reason I took the archetype in the first place. So seeing more Invoke the Crimson Oath stuff. It's a laser sword. You're gonna give me a laser sword and not expect me to be like, oh yeah, I'm taking that. I love Invoke the Crimson Oath. So for Love, for Lightning, love that too. Was that written by the same author?
Yes, that was also Isabel.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Isabel contributed a number of rules as well. But she didn't contribute to the next section, which I think this was Jessica Catalan, which was the nightly training, where there's much like the idea with the archetype expansions, there's just expansions for existing classes, right?
Yeah.
Rather than it just makes a lot of sense that sometimes, maybe you don't take an archetype, but you're still a wizard who's a knight of Lastwall, and you get some extra little abilities here and there, and that's what these feats represent. So there's just a lot of flavor and possibility for any class, I would hope. I don't think every class in the game is covered, unfortunately, but most see at least one thing, which is pretty nice.
Yeah. Would you recommend, not as anything official, but would you recommend, for example, detonating spell seems to go to all the 10th level casters? Would you recommend that maybe a psychic might be able to pick it up too?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. In my game, I would allow that for sure. Just because the problem with options, which is a thing that we will run into forever, is that we are writing things that only contribute to things that already exist. We don't know if some other class is going to come out 4 years from now that's a perfect fit to stand alongside champion and fighter for all the champion and fighter feats. We kind of assume that GMs at least in home games are free to do that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, society play is a different question altogether, but for the most part, if it feels like it makes sense and matches with the classes, go for it. I'd say give them to those other new classes as well.
Speaking of new classes, there's no gunslinger or inventor options. Was that just it was too close together, the development of these two books?
Yes, I think it was partially, and also those being uncommon classes already have a lot of extra stuff going with them. So it was I don't think it worked out, unfortunately, but we'll see if maybe future books might have gunslinger stuff if there were things where it makes a lot more sense for them. I also don't know if thematically, not to we say all classes welcome, but some I think are a little harder to sell at a table.
The inventor can do anything.
Well, yes, but the gunslinger is what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, sure, no, gunslinger.
Well, don't we have the divine gunslinger artwork from Lost Omens World Guide?
We have one, yes, and she's the one that we got a lot of questions about because it looks like she's loading bullets into a revolver. It looks like she has 6 chambers, which is not a thing that should exist. Oops.
There's only one. You have to fight her for it.
Yeah, which is why we swapped her gun out later in this book for like a Numerian laser pistol. So it's a lot easier sell. I will admit, I'm going to make a confession here. One of these feats came about selfishly, which is the Agile shield grip feat.
Ooh.
Where it's all about being able to have the Agile property on your shield so you don't take as many penalties when you're multiple attacks with the shield and stuff. Because I was playing a fighter in Jason Keeley's Strange Aeons AP, and I wanted to do that. So I just asked Mark, hey, could we, Mark Sector being the lead designer for this book, hey, can we include a feat like this? Yeah, sure, just type it up. I think we have space for it, and added it in with the hopes that by the time this is published, I'll be able to use it on my character. Jason was very, very, very kind and said, hey, you have access to stuff that other people don't, so I'm not letting you take stuff just because you can work at Paizo and know the feats that are coming out. You have to be on the same playing field as everyone else, which is nice to the rest of the group, right? Not to me. And I didn't get to use Agile Shield Grip until it was published, and by the time it was published, we finished our campaign, so I never got to use it. But I think a lot of people enjoy that feat anyway, so it was I don't think anyone was going to be upset that it ended up being published.
Now, we have a question from chat,
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I understand it, so maybe in reading it, you'll understand it. It's from Creative Burst. How did making any Knight of Lastwall able to take Theses feat affect taking these Theses feats?
I think they're asking, so it specifically says these feats all Knights of Lastwall have access to these feats, which that has a specific mechanical implication. Access just means if it's uncommon and you have access to it, you can take it as if it were common. So you can be a Knight of Lastwall if you're a part of the group. You can just get these feats without having to ask your GM for it, basically. Or in society play, you know, if you have access to them and are have the right faction or whatever, it gives you these feats. You can take them without having to spend any like additional points or whatever to unlock them.
Yeah, but like
doesn't mean...
So they were saying these, not theses.
Yeah, I think they were saying these, but that doesn't mean that every character can take them. You still have to be a bard or a champion to take Reliable Squire, for example. You can't just be like, oh, Agile Shield Grip, a wizard can take that because I have access to it as a Knight of Lastwall. No, you have to still meet the requirements, which is one of those classes listed there. Otherwise, there are other ways to get that, but having access to it doesn't necessarily mean everyone can take it. It just means that you don't have to ask your GM about it if you want to take it, but meet all the other prerequisites as normal.
Fair.
Moving on from these feats, which there's so many feats here. Finally, looking at equipment and our magic items here. Equipment is a short 2-page section and another 4 pages of magic items. Lots of fun stuff here, I think, but all kind of thematic to knights and knightly orders, and of course the Knights of Lastwall.
Right. So glad to see the bladed gauntlet. We've been wanting to see that since I think the first artwork for that was an Inner Sea Intrigue like 5 years ago, and people were like, oh man, I want the Assassin's Creed gauntlet knife. Come on.
Here you go. Of course, when you think of Assassin's Creed, you think of Knights of Lastwall.
So. Of course. Hey, someone hired the Red Mantis to assassinate Tar Baphomet.
That's true. Any particular standouts among the rest of the equipment or magic items for you, Ryan?
I gotta be honest. Anytime I'm reading the equipment, if I don't have a character in mind that I'm going to use them for, I tend to just forget about them immediately.
That's fine. That's fair.
Fair.
I'm not gonna be upset with you for that. That makes a lot of sense. Then I'll talk about a thing I really like, which for some reason I keep telling people about this on other interviews about it, but I just really like the Camp Shroud, which is some powder that you throw into your kind of campfire, and it creates this magical aura around you where people can't see your campfire from a distance. So you can keep yourself hidden. If they get close enough, they can still see you, or if they can see in the dark, they can still see you. But I just think it's kind of a neat little item. And the story behind this is that it was actually originally a spell that didn't fit in the spell section anymore, but we had not enough space in the item section, so I converted it into just a magic item that anyone can use at that point.
So like this reminds me of the first RPG Superstar, where Sean K. Reynolds, one of his points was like, first round is present wondrous items, and like half of them were campsite items, and he didn't understand. And so whenever I see a campsite item come in, it's like, why do we love campsite items so much?
I think it's because it makes your adventuring life a little easier.
And I think we feel so vulnerable when we're just relaxing by the campfire. And we don't want to be ambushed. But we should be, because we're sitting there with a fire in the middle of a dark area.
When the GM asked during the 27th session, so what's the watch order at night going to be? And you're like, wait, you've never asked us that before.
I know that the RPG Superstar tips, collected tips over the years from Sean K. Reynolds included, don't make things easier for the players by making their camping life easier or whatever. That's not a Superstar item, which is true. That's not an exciting item for the Superstar contest. But hey, we can still publish that kind of stuff for real in a Lost Omens book.
Numbat18 wants to know if they can still smell the fire.
All it does is prevent the light from being visible. Light and smoke are not visible. Everything else still exists. So yeah, in theory, someone could smell the fire, be very confused when there's no fire that they can see, and then just kind of have to live with it.
The old, if you cast invisibility on a torch, does it shine light?
Justin, what items did you think were cool? What magic items did you...
Man, what magic items did I really enjoy? I'm just gonna say one more time, I'm really impressed by the mundane items. I know how difficult it could be to write those and balance those, since they tend to be considered always available compared to the magic items. So really impressed on that. The campaign stable was really fun. I really love the idea that while yes, you don't have to take Cavalier to be a knight. There's still really fun items in here if you want to be your standard mounted knight, or in this case, an item for the whole party if you all want mounts. Plus, I really like the magical structures. I think they're fun. I think they give the players a lot of fun things they could do with them, a lot of interesting ways they could use them. I appreciate the campaign stable. The artwork for it is on point too. It's really evocative for what it says it is. Little wooden horseshoe that turns into a bunch of stables for some horses.
That's it. Last in this chapter are the Knights of Lastwall spells, which a lot of divine magic going on, but spells for everyone here. All four traditions are covered. A lot of interesting things going on here. A lot of undead fighting spells as well. Any standouts for you two on this section?
So a couple. One of them was Empathic Link, and it stood out for the wrong reasons, because you share emotions with your target, and I was like, ooh, what if I'm like arachnophobic and I cast it on an naughty spellcaster? But it has to be a willing creature, so that plan goes out the window. But one I really liked was Forced Mercy, where you force a target's attacks to deal non-lethal damage, which, in the hands of a player, that's a really cool way of lightening the lethality of an encounter. But if you were to cast that if an undead caster were to cast that on a living player, I forget, are undead still immune to non-lethal damage?
Yeah, in a lot of cases they are.
So this is a great defensive spell for an undead creature. And Book of the Dead just came out.
Yeah, that's true. It also has a really interesting line where it says a willing target can choose to critically fail their saving throw. So if you cast it on your allies, you can turn on 1 minute of non-lethal damage if you're so inclined as well. So you can use it
because they ignore the penalty. Oh, this is such a multi-purpose spell.
You can use it for your party. You can use it on an enemy as well. So there's a lot going on with it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah,
it's first level spell, so a lot of people get used to it.
Yeah. There's a lot of neat spells like that you're not 100% sure what you're going to do with it, but you're going to use it and you're going to love it. Like Synchronized Steps, giving everyone a reaction to stride. Or, But what I noticed were the 2 shield spells in this. Really useful, really fun. Desperate Repair, being able to hold a shield together when it's about to be destroyed, so you have it for, one more stand, or so you could more easily repair it afterward, taking a little bit less time. And Dancing Shield is getting a lot of talk for a good reason. It's a wonderful spell. I love it, being able to use a shield to protect an ally. I want to load up on a bunch of explosive shields and throw a Dancing Shield on them, but really
so
cool.
Actually, I know that in second edition there is like a lot of like hand economy, we could call it, where it really is there's creatures with multiple arms don't get a lot of benefits for that, and there's very little options that allow you to act like you don't have something in that hand even though you do. So Dancing Shield is one of the rare exceptions to that, and I'm wondering is that an indication of the direction that some of the options might be going, or is this just an exception?
So if you are a spellcaster and want a shield, you have the shield spell. Usually that's good enough, except when compared to a couple of specific shields. You wouldn't want to use Dancing Shield on yourself. It's just kind of not necessarily a waste, but it's not an efficient use of your time and your actions, because you have to spend an action to sustain it. Except, maybe at high levels where you get a free sustain every turn. But the thing it's really meant for is you have, the paladin who normally fights with a bastard sword, right? But they decide they need to go all out. They drop their shield. The cleric casts Dancing Shield on it to keep that shield to protect them, but then they can two-hand their bastard sword and go all out and stuff like that. And in terms of that action economy handedness thing that you're talking about, I think it ends up breaking even because it forces some of that extra, or some of the actions that you would normally have to spend on it. You are not using it, but someone else is using it. So as far as the game's concerned, the actions are being used. It just, hey, you're dedicating yourself to being the shield on behalf of someone else in that case. And I mean, Mark Seifter said it was fine when he did his design pass. So I think I understand his reasoning for how it ended up ultimately. So yeah, I don't necessarily see this happening too often in the future, but I think the occasional spell where you do something on behalf of someone else is maybe so it's got some potential as well, here and there.
Definitely. Do you think you might see a character, due to a special monster ability with a broken hand, have to use lock item to wield their weapon?
Maybe.
Oh, come on. It's a great scene.
Yeah.
If you're a GM and you know your player prepares lock item for whatever reason, you got to hit them with a monster who can damage their hand just to see if they do it. Oh, man. Dividing Trench is really cool, too. I love seeing, whole spells that could reorder the battlefield, rearrange the battlefield, spells that make you want to print out special maps you could bring to the scenario and throw on the table are always kind of fun.
Sure. Well, I think that covers all of this chapter. Lots of player options that we kind of discussed already in our chapter or player options preview, actually a couple weeks ago here for No Direction. But last chapter here is Knights of Lastwall Efforts, which is kind of all the campaign hooks that are left, talking about all the different regions in which the Knights of Lastwall are active and the kind of stuff that they're undergoing, and also specifically a Gravelands Gazetteer. Gravelands are a new region in 2E, and you couldn't look back at the 1E world guide and be like, oh, Lastwall. I'm sure that's all the exact same after it got blown up by the most powerful witch in the land. So it's kind of an interesting chance to show off this region without having to wait on kind of an Eye of Dread book or anything like that.
I love the art, like not the 2-page splash, but then page 98, where we've got
the goblins.
Human strategist looking at a map. He looks like he's got the special edition of the Pathfinder core rulebook in his hand. And then, just surrounded by goblins. Most of them look ready to fight. One of them is lighting a bomb over onto the side. And he's just trying to get the plan ready for this group that he's been assigned. Oh, yeah, the one is getting a mustache drawn on his face. I guess that's his battle mustache.
That's because he fell asleep.
Yeah.
Is okay. I thought he was willingly giving his face to the goblin with the quill, but now that I look at the goblin with the quill, he does look like he's up to something.
Yeah, he's getting pranked.
Yeah, but there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of cool design to the goblin armor. Like, no two goblins on this page look the same.
Right. Right. I love how, like, one of the helmets looks like it used to be a chalice. The other one's just a bucket upside down with eye holes cut out of it. Is this your standard Venture Captain opening during an org play scenario, by the way?
Yeah, that feels like it fits pretty well. I just throw on pre-gen faces on all of them and you're good.
I wrote the introduction to this chapter.
Oh,
Yes.
Cool.
And this opening line, undeath is the broken mirror upon which life and death reflects at once. When I read that, I was like, oh, that's cool. I don't remember writing that. And so I went back to my outline and it's like, no, that's not the opening chapter. I guess Luis added that. But no, I wrote it. It's just, it was buried somewhere in it and it was thrown out as an inconsequential line. So Luis, you spotted that. You saw its potential and were like, no, this is the thesis statement for this chapter. And I appreciate you taking my words and making them better.
That's the job. I will say I'm only going to take partial credit on that because I don't remember even if I did that. It could have been the editors who moved that around and realized the potential on it. But I sure didn't cut those words before it got sent off to edit. So at least there's that. But yeah, I think it's a great starting line and very philosophical, I think, about this whole nature of undeath and everything. It feels like something that would have been just right at home in Book of the Dead as well. So great job with that line.
I don't remember writing it.
I don't remember.
It's nice
half
when
of
you
the
get
development
impressed with your own
process.
writing.
Indeed. It is really good.
Any comments for the Gravelands section at all? The only particular note I have here is, hey, we brought back random encounters.
Yeah. That was my note. Was, oh, I saw the D100 charts and all these different monsters. I love how you put the threat levels next to them, so you could kind of just look through this and not necessarily roll, just be like, we're playing level 5, so what could they encounter in a forest? Okay, cool. 2d4 shambler troops or 1d3 skeletal husks. That would be a moderate 5. Awesome. That's a good idea. I'm gonna look up those stats.
And it's nice that I don't have to put my percentile D10 away at the beginning of a session, because there's very little percentage rolling in Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
That's true. Unless you have a Rod of Wonder, you don't really have much going on.
I think that's literally the only time it shows up in the core rulebook.
Yes, I think that's correct. And because of its existence, we also had to make mention of the percentile dice in like, here's all the dice that you could use to play. Because technically there's one instance where it might show up with the Rod of Wonder. I think so Ron Lundeen wrote the Graveland section, and he of course did the tables here for the random encounters, and I think he did a great job. 2E I don't think has used too many random encounters tables, at least not percentile based. You might see like a D21 or like a D6, D10, something like that here and there. But I think it's because it's kind of hard to imagine what these are because of the way the encounter system works. I think he did a fantastic job with kind of squaring the circle here and figuring this all out in a way that works for what you kind of expect out of a classic encounter table, but still doesn't necessarily break encounters. It tells you outright, hey, moderate 7 is too much for a second level party, no matter how cool they think they are. At least you have the warning that the red flag is there. Up to you if you use it or not, but I think he found a way to present that information in a way that prevents GMs from accidentally causing a problem at their table.
And if you have to pick a region to have a chart where PCs might be smarter running away, the Gravelands is a perfect place for it. I mean, even in the first PFS scenario there for 2nd edition, you are expected to run away from a number of encounters that are just too much for the PCs to handle, which that makes sense. It's the Gravelands.
The next sections cover a couple of different regions. First off, it goes into the Greater Eye of Dread region. It talks about the politics of all the nations immediately surrounding the Gravelands. And then it goes into Absalom, which includes Ulthun II, who's one of the leaders of the Knights of Lastwall, how he's trying to recruit people, and Absalom being kind of a staging area for that kind of stuff. Then talks about the Broken Lands, which is a place where maybe it's not full of undeath, but there's still kind of evil stuff going on. Particularly the closing of the World Wound has left behind a lot of demons. And then the Shining Kingdoms as well, as a place. Knights of Lastwall are your knights in shining armor. In some cases, so the Shining Kingdoms is also a good spot to possibly have some adventures. And finally, covers some campaigns in other regions that maybe don't have as much of a presence, but might still have some knights here and there. Do any of these inspire some ideas for campaigns, or at least maybe just a character? It's like, oh, I didn't know I could have come from Absalom, or I could have come from Taldor or something.
Well, the Numerian knight art is a nice reminder of just how weird Galarian can be sometimes. I don't know about anything specific, but just, I think in general, the main thing this book makes me want to do is run a Knights of Lastwall campaign. So something that's not just roll up a single character and have them, go exploring around the world, but like, I want everyone to be involved in the Knights. I want to be dealing with a conflict that's important to the Knights. I don't know exactly what that story would be, but I definitely know like that would be the ground that I want to tread on.
Yeah. I really love the bit of the Knights of the Starstone potentially searching out other fragments of the meteor that contain the Starstone. That writes a campaign in of itself and very much plays to the homage of the classic knights on a journey looking for a holy relic, especially if it will help you defeat the Whispering Tyrant, or figure out what he wants to do with the Starstone. That whole bit is really inspiring.
I particularly like the note about how if they can't figure out a way to stop the power or counteract the power of the Starstone. They might just be seeking a way to destroy it once and for all, which is, I think, a very potent campaign hook.
Yeah, definitely.
We have enough gods in this setting.
Yeah.
Did you see the last one that made it? He's a drunk. I don't know if canonically he's the last one.
It was Norgorber.
It
Technically.
was Norgorber was the last one? Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. Norgorber, then Iomedae, and then Caden. So anyway, those are all probably asking for trouble in some way or another, depending on who you ask. So that's it. That's Knights of the Lastwall broken down. A lot of book here. I think a lot of interesting ideas. Like I said, the process of creating this book helped me find a big love for the organization. It's not a review, but would you ultimately recommend this book to anyone?
I would. So first of all, if it's something that just, if you're interested in the topic, it's absolutely a book you should get. But it's also a book you can get with confidence that you will use a lot of it, even if you're never running a Knights of Lastwall campaign or even playing a Knight of Lastwall. Because you may have noticed that when we got to Chapter 3, which was the player options, we very rarely referenced the Knights of Lastwall themselves. At that point, it just became, there's a bunch of cool options in here that could apply to multiple different characters. It's designed for the Knights of Lastwall, but it's not exclusive to them, and it makes sense for a lot of different builds.
I would also recommend this to anybody who is thinking of themselves writing a campaign book. The layout, the way the information is presented in such a way really makes it easy to be inspired to run a campaign, to kind of have a setting book. If anyone out there wanted to write a Adventures in Arcadia Pathfinder Infinite book, this was a great potential layout for how you could kind of set it up with, like, here's the NPC, here's the region, here's the NPCs, here's what's life there for everybody, and here's some really cool mechanics that absolutely push the limits of archetype design in Pathfinder 2e.
Well, there you go. Check out Knights of Lastwall. If any of this sounds interesting at all to you, sure, I'll hold my book up too.
There we go.
There we go. I think next we got to move on to some Pathfinder news, and I don't think Dustin has the prompts to do the
Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news.
There we go.
There you go. We have a transition we can deploy at any time. Yeah. Hey, Dustin, I think you were being very kind in collecting all our Pathfinder news for this episode. So do you mind kicking off some of the new...
Sure. First up, we have the Organized Play monthly update on the Paizo blog that all these will be linked in chat if you're watching on Twitch. They announced that every player in both Starfinder and Pathfinder Society now has 80 achievement points, which is enough to get most of the ancestries and heritages, or at least get you almost there. So if you wanted to play Pathfinder or Starfinder Society, but you were kind of going, but I really only want to play if I could play a Kitsune, hey, now you have those achievement points and you're good to go. And if you still just want to play a core ancestry, you could always use these for some really cool flavorful boons, or just save them for if your character gets killed.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head how much it is for a hobgoblin?
I think it can't be more than 80. I think it's actually a little cheaper than 80 because of what happened during a scenario that gave them somewhat of a discount.
Oh, well, now's my time to play my hobgoblin swashbuckler that I talked about on Legend Lore, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Give him an agile shield.
Maybe. Wait, no, he can't do that. He's not a champion or a fighter, so it'd be a lot of work to get the feat. Curse you, Jason Keeley, for not just letting me use it before it hit print.
Yeah. And there's also faction pins now for Pathfinder 2e. I've been waiting for a Verdant Bloom one myself for a long time, so I'm really happy to see the faction pins return for all the new factions in Pathfinder 2e. And the boons for them, if there will be, the boons are forthcoming. So we'll see those when they come out.
I was going to say, I'm pretty far removed from Pathfinder Society at this point, so I wasn't sure if a pin got you a reroll. So you suggest owning a pin, there will be a boon attached to it?
In the old Pathfinder Society, it gave you a bonus to specific skills, but I don't know now. Hobgoblins are 120 achievement points.
Oh. Even after the discount?
Yeah, no, I was thinking of a different ancestry that got the discount. But 120 is really easy to get to if you just GM for a couple sessions at Gen Con or PaizoCon Europe, which the next Paizo post is in fact recruitment for GMs for Gen Con and PaizoCon Online.
Which is a nice transition, but we haven't really had a chance to talk about the first news item.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I know that this was kind of a very famous rant of Param's of how the achievement points were working. And a lot of the solutions that I saw suggested was that if you buy a book, then you immediately get access to the options. I think this is a pretty good alternative to that. I don't know what Param would say. Param knows the subject way better than me and felt very passionately about it. But I think at least now, if you're brand new to Pathfinder and you get excited and you buy a handful of books and then you get home, you don't have to have that disappointment of finding out that none of the options in a particular book, usually the Lost Omens books, are not available to you yet. 80 points it's a nice start. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and it's enough for pretty much, it's enough for a lot of things. It's enough for, I think, most of the uncommon ancestries I'm seeing here.
Just not the one Louis wants.
Sorry.
That's all right.
And if you GM an AP, you could get credit for that as well. That's another.
Louis, have you ever GM'd an AP?
Boy, have I.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can get retroactive credit for having been part of 8 campaigns.
You can play all the hobgoblins you'd want.
Just ask your GM to submit, and you'll be good to go. Yeah. And yes, and the alternative would be, of course, to GM at a major convention gets you a whole mess of points. And PaizoCon Europe 2022 and PaizoCon Online Europe 2022 and Gen Con Online all want volunteers.
Yeah, PaizoCon Europe got announced at PaizoCon, and it's like right after Gen Con, right?
It is
August 18th to 21st, so
yes.
later that
few
month.
weeks
It gives you a couple of weeks.
Yes, it does. And all the information is there on the blog, as well as the interest form, and for both of them, which is not a complete. You won't be penalized if you sign up the form and then go, oh wait, I can't make it. So if you're interested at all, go ahead and sign up.
And so if anyone's like, well, I'm not in Europe, remember it's also PaizoCon Online Europe.
Yeah.
And they need online GMs. And you know what? There's probably some times where our European players will be sleeping, and we North Americans are wide awake, and we could be running games at unconventional times for that convention.
Oh, that's great. So the next bit of news, we had a really cool Meet the Iconics blog that everyone's been talking about by AV Cool. It is Mios the Thaumaturge. Avi.
Yeah, the iconic Thaumaturge. They are from Ustalov, and they battled a werewolf, and lots of fun stuff happened along the way. Yeah, I think Avi's been very excited, I know, for a long time to have a hand in Mios's creation. I think they were tapped for some of this stuff as early as the deciding of what the iconic Thaumaturge was going to look like. Avi, I think, had at least they were being asked about like potential backstory and stuff like that. Is there pretty early on, so getting to see that finally come out, I'm sure is exciting for Avi. And also seeing, a non-binary iconic is, I think, very exciting for a lot of people out there as well.
Yeah.
Well, and the way Avi was explaining it too is that it's like people have a certain impression about what a non-binary character might look like, and so the fact that this avoids some of the trappings of how non-binary characters are usually illustrated was very important to them. I'm also very curious, because the Thaumaturge is the class that just collects items, like, I have no idea what this character, like, how much of that is just stuff piled on top of them. Like, where does the thaumaturge end and just the stuff begin?
Only Wayne Reynolds knows.
Yeah. And Wayne Reynolds knows.
Wayne probably has elaborate information on each piece on Mios's gear at this point. It's interesting. If you ever get a chance to talk to Wayne or read some of his breakdowns of his characters, he puts them on Facebook or sometimes on the Paizo message boards. They're just so interesting and lots of great information that's I don't think anyone would have known unless Wayne happened to put it out into the world.
Yep. And if you like Avi's Iconic and you someday want to tell them how much you like it, you could become an editor and work for them at Paizo, because there are editing positions open, and anybody who's interested, even a little, should apply and check it out.
That's it.
I love the idea that the only way this person can think of to give off that feedback is to get a job as an editor, so that maybe they'll be able to tell them in person.
I needed a transition.
Yeah, I know. I know exactly how we got there. But yeah, like I've talked a lot about how much I love the Paizo editors. The Paizo editors are unsung heroes of the entire process, and you too could wear the cape of the editor if you are qualified. And am I remembering wrong? This isn't even like there's remote options, right? The position is currently remote if you're a resident of the state of Washington or Indiana.
Correct. So right now, I know Paizo has things set up in such a way that both Indiana and Washington are available for remote work. That might even change in the future. I don't know for sure what any plans are coming down the pipeline, or if the union is working on any of that kind of stuff as well. But for now, those are the positions. But there are actually 2 editing positions. So if you felt like you didn't have a chance, that's not true ever. You can always apply, and I think should do so. But now you actually have twice as much of a chance as before, because there's 2 slots there, and you can join what I consider the greatest team in RPGs. I'm not talking about the Pathfinder or the Paizo team. I'm specifically talking about the editing team at Paizo, who are some of my favorite people in the entire world. Great times. And actually, I think this has reminded me, hey, maybe now's our chance to finally have an editor on to talk about editing at Paizo for No Direction sometime. That was a thing that Ryan has tried to do a couple of times.
Well, at last year's Gen Con, we got to have an hour-long conversation, Param and I, with Avi, and it really was an amazing conversation. So that is available on the site if anyone wants to go into the con recordings, Gen Con 2021. You'll be able to find it in there. But I also encourage you to get some editors on the podcast.
I think I know a few people at Paizo, so maybe I can talk to the right people and get maybe Leo Glass, who's the managing editor in charge of the team, on, or maybe bring Avi back, something like that. It'll be great. It'll be a chance to talk about that. We'll see. I'll talk to Vanessa and everyone else and see what we can figure out in the future. I'm just saying, hey, the editing team rules. You should try to apply if you're at all interested. Even if you don't get the job, I think if you're interested in editing, you'll end up learning a fair amount from the process, right? You'll have to learn about even just the little things about what you want to talk about on your resume or application and stuff like that. That I think is just always helpful experience, even if you don't get much further than that. I think trying is still going to get you a lot.
There's actually a news story, Dustin, in your outline that got skipped, and that is that there's been some additions to the Paizo leadership team.
Yes. This happened very recently.
Yeah. So Ray Kong and Maggie Gallagher were added to the leadership team. I don't know if I've met either of them, but I know at least Ray comes highly recommended from anyone that has worked with her. Just exactly the kind of manager you want to have in your department, and so now they're on the leadership team. Now that she's on the leadership team, that is just sounds like a great person for the job. Not to undermine Maggie, I just don't know her, and I don't know her reputation as well. But Ray Kong specifically is someone that it's been flagged and brought to my attention as like that is an excellent person to be promoted to this position.
I know there was a lot of excitement when this information got out internally. It was announced internally.
Oh no, they leaked.
Announced
leaked
internally.
To be a press release.
And yeah, just a lot of excitement. And I know there's a lot of excitement around Maggie coming on board originally as director of people. I forget the exact title that Maggie had. Was basically head of HR, and now is moving up even further to hopefully help the company with more capacity at that point. So lots of excitement, and it's great to have just more people on that leadership team and having a lot more perspectives as well.
Maggie is the vice president of people and culture.
Thank you.
And Ray is the vice president of technology.
There you go. They've gone from directors to vice presidents. Good for them.
Awesome. In other news, and I didn't put this in the thing because it slipped my mind until right now. June 1st, Aaron Shanks tweeted out that there will be a Pathfinder and Starfinder Infinite celebration starting August 15th to August 28th. And that's all I know about it, but that's exciting.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have been... I think it feels like Infinite's been slowly picking up steam since its release, and I'm excited to see more and more spotlight shine on it, and more people come to it, contribute to it, buy from it, of course, and just see that grow over time.
Definitely. I'm a fan, if you didn't know.
Dustin, I think you are responsible for a lot of the growth. I don't know what percentage, but there's definitely been you being such a fan of it, you sharing your enthusiasm and making sure that people that are contributing to it get a spotlight, get an opportunity to talk about the products they've been working on. That is a boon for Infinite and a boon for the community as a whole.
I just want more content, but great.
Content, yes.
Is there any other news?
You tell me. You're the one who put together the outline.
I think the last little bits that you have here probably fit better as shout outs.
I thought so.
As well. So I think let's move over to our shout outs for the episode. I forget, was there a transition for this as well?
Was there a transition for this? Wrap ups and shout outs. Wrap ups and shout outs. Wrap ups and shout outs. And water.
There we go. Thank you for listening to episode, what are we? 278?
278 sounds... 277 according to
277?
Twitch. I think that might be wrong. No, I think we're 278.
Oh,
278. No direction.
Because there was no 277 live. That was the pre-recorded one.
That's it. There we go. I've ruined it all by having a pre-recorded episode.
Why couldn't you record it live after 4 days of working a convention?
Who could have guessed? Hey, thanks for listening to No Direction. Before we go, I wanted to shout out a couple of different things, not our typical hey, we're going to tell you some cool stuff. First, I want to shout out the No Direction Network itself. NoDirectionPodcast.com has a lot of great blogs and information and news always available at any time. Lots of great shows, including adventurous legend lore, a lot of Starfinder related stuff like digital divination, and of course the flagship No Direction. You can always find episodes that you've missed there. Of course, it also has a link to what has been touted as the chillest Discord server ever on the internet, the No Direction Discord server. There's a link on the homepage there that you can join up, come chat with anyone about whatever you want, be it Pathfinder, Starfinder, any other games, or just whatever. It's a great place to hang out and meet people, talk with us directly. And of course, if you want to get us even more directly, if you want a direct line to the rest of the No Direction networks, you can always try to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/No Direction, to contribute to the show, but also get access to special privileges, including access to the Patrons Private Sanctum, the after party that comes by after every episode in the direction, where you can come by, chat with us about today's episode, or just whatever you want. You have us at a couch, basically, your digital couch, where you can come hang out with us for a little while after the show and just spend some time with us and get to hear us talking about Knights of Lastwall or anything else that you decide. You can kind of steer the boat on that one. Come by, come support us, and come hang out with us as well. So yeah, lots of fun stuff you can do at nodirectionpodcast.com, it turns out. Excellent. Anyway, speaking of shout outs, hey Dustin, what are your shout outs?
Let's see. My first shout out, I feel like we should do a shout out to Eldamon, Roll for Combats. They announced at PaizoCon they are doing a book, a game, a Kickstarter, a bunch of content involving using different elemental monsters, 20 different elements. I'm just going to say it. It's like Pokemon and Pathfinder, so I'm extraordinarily happy about it. I
am shocked with how bold they've been in there, just saying, like, yeah, it's Pokemon. It is absolutely Pokemon for Pathfinder.
Exactly. I mean, you could say it's Jade Cocoon for Pathfinder.
Or Digimon.
I don't know what that means, but I know what Pokemon for Pathfinder means.
Yeah, so you could check it out at Eldamon. No, it's not on eldamon.com. Well, you could check it out at the post that I will link in chat as I quickly look up where a better link to it. You could probably... Oh, no, it will be on eldamon.com. There will be a playtest there. Yeah, eldamon.com forwards you to their mailing list, and then you could become a part of the playtest and check it out and see if it's the kind of thing that interests you.
Yeah. I noticed that you had here on this list a thing I wanted to shout out. So I'm going to get to it before you end up accidentally beating me to it, and then I have nothing to shout out, which is the Dice Will Roll podcast. They're an actual play podcast that particularly very queer focused. I know a lot of the players are part of the queer community. Lots of good stuff going on there, but particularly they just launched their Fist of the Ruby Phoenix campaign. Episode 1 went up, I believe, today. And I'm very excited for that, partially because, you know, hey, it's supporting a cool podcast, great actual play, great people, pretty fun. I think Fist of the Ruby Phoenix is a cool idea for a campaign, and I am particularly interested in listening because, hey, I wrote the first adventure of that campaign. So for once, I have an AP where if people start playing it, I don't have to wait for them to get to book 4 or 5 before I start hearing what they did with my stuff. I can start hearing it right away. So I'm excited to hear that. So if you're interested in actual play of Ruby Phoenix, and you know, maybe haven't found one that you're interested in, or you just want to hear more people playing this campaign, go check out dicewillroll.com and check out their campaigns, or you can check out their previous campaigns. I think they were also doing Extinction Curse and Kingmaker, a conversion of Kingmaker to 2e. Previously, so lots of great content there as well if you're interested in Pathfinder 2e. Anyway, sorry to jump the gun. Hey Ryan, what was your shout out for the...
All right, I got a few here. So first of all, Digital Divination has lost a co-host. In case you hadn't heard, Ron Lundin has left Paizo and has joined a new company, which he actually announced today is Wizards of the Coast, as I believe some people speculated. And just by the nature of the job, he won't be able to support another company's role-playing game while he's working for Wizards, and so he's had to step away from Digital Divination. But John found a replacement co-host without having to miss a single episode. Jason Keeley, longtime cast member of the adventurous actual play on No Direction, and of course a staff member in the Star Chamber working on Starfinder at Paizo. He'll be taking over the co-hosting duties with John starting Thursday, so starting the day after this releases as a podcast, and you know, a couple of days later after this live recording. I'm looking forward to it. Jason Keeley is a fun, clever guy. He's passionate about Starfinder. I have a feeling that he and John are going to really hit it off as co-hosts.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
All right, next up, I want to point out that the PaizoCon Online 2022 seminar coverage is done. It's PaizoCon was only a couple of weeks ago, but all 17 seminars have been posted to the site. It should not be this easy. It was ridiculous how quickly I managed to get those edited, assembled, posted. Basically, the only thing that I didn't get to do in one evening was that I had not created any banners for these posts. And I was like, hey, Dustin, here's something you can do better than me and faster than me. And so Dustin put together all the banners, and we were able to release these seminars just 2 a day for basically the entire time. So now if there's any of the PaizoCon Online 2022 seminars that you missed and that you're interested in and that you want to be able to listen to at your, convenience rather than having to log into Twitch or on YouTube, where they're both available from Paizo's official channels, you can go to nodirectionpodcast.com, go to the convention coverage. Oh, actually, I gotta update some links because anyway, if you go to Con Recordings, PaizoCon Online 2022, by the time this goes up as a podcast, all 17 seminars will be linked properly in that section. Otherwise, you're just going to have to go to any of my Now You Knows and click on the links, and you can find that in the news section. Anyway, there's plenty of ways you can easily find the seminar coverage on our website. And a couple more shout-outs. Charred Knight, a Knights of Lastwall archetype, is a Pathfinder Infinite product posted by Sasha
Laura Noah Harving.
Thank you. I just realized that I have never said full name. Sasha Lorena Harving, and it is based on the Charcoal Battalion that we were talking about in this very review. The product takes the Charcoal Battalion in directions I was not expecting. It really emphasizes like the tactical and ingenuity of the faction, which I don't think I had written in there. So that is just something that Sasha read into it based on what I had turned over. But it's super cool seeing a faction that, did not exist, now exists, and now already has support products for it.
Yeah.
So, $177 will get you a PDF with an archetype for a Charcoal Battalion Knight of Lastwall. And Sasha wrote on Knights of Lastwall, right, Luis?
No.
Oh, no? Oh, well.
Just a fan of the fan of the Knights of Lastwall stuff. Inspired someone for Infinite.
Very
cool. And as long as we're doing Infinite shoutouts and Dice Will Roll shoutouts, Derry Luttrell of Dice Will Roll got a product that got silver in like 2 or 3 days on Pathfinder Infinite called Witches Plus. It's has some alternative I'll just say fixes for the witches, suggested errata for the witches is how they put it, and a bunch of new patrons, class feats, final lessons, a bunch of new content. If you want to play a witch, it's a great product. I was fortunate enough to be able to talk to Tony Saunders and Derry Luttrell on Friday, and it was a really fun interview, and the product looks really, really solid.
Awesome. Well, I think that covers all our shout outs. So I guess until next time, I'm Luis Loza.
I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Dustin Knight.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.